So why a talk on Christian nationalism? The topic seems to be eclipsed by other national transgressions these days. Illegal arrests and deportations of our immigrant community, regressive tariffs, regressive tax code that benefits the rich, gutting of our social safety net, disregard for the rule of law, the grift, and now the deployment of our civil military in the homeland. Unfortunately, I think this is connective tissue between the people and agenda promoting these transgressions and Christian nationalism. I believe tonight Jenny will shine a light on some of this connective tissue. Jenny Williams has been a United Methodist pastor in West Virginia for over 20 years, leading congregations into relationship with people in their communities who have historically been excluded by society and their church. She is committed to queer justice and anti-racism work and has organized around trans rights, poverty, immigration, climate justice, and homelessness, and racism in policing. In 2022, Jenny stepped away from local church ministry and joined the staff of the ACLU in West Virginia. As its first faith-based organizer, in her free time, she plays the tambourine adequately, she says. Maybe some of you know. She plays for the local chapter of Beers and Hymns. So with that, welcome Jenny Williams.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's good to be with all of you. It's good to see familiar faces. Welcome to friends, family, folks that I've known from lots of different churches in the community, and good to see folks that I have never met. So I hope that we will continue to be in relationship. I'm really glad to be here tonight. I'm grateful to MICA for all of your energy and action. It's been so impressive to watch in Morgantown and also the offshoot group that formed in Preston County. There's a great group of leaders. It's wonderful to see established leaders and new folks coming into leadership, and I'm honored to talk with you all tonight. I'm glad to be with all of you who are in person and those who are participating via video or audio. So my role at the ACLU of West Virginia is to build power among people of faith to work for social justice in our state. And the way that I have chosen to do that is by building the West Virginia Faith Collective with some friends of mine, which seeks justice and liberation for all people in the Mountain State. There are three organizations that kind of built the Faith Collective. There's Justice and Jubilee, which is a progressive Christian movement for liberation in the state. From Below is our Coalfield Justice Org and is centered in McDowell County. And then the West Virginia Faith Leaders Network, which is a multi-issue interfaith advocacy network. And if you're interested in that one, Zach, would you raise your hand? Zach, who does a little bit of everything, is working with the Faith Leaders Network in Morgantown. So I am one of the leaders for Justice and Jubilee. And Justice and Jubilee focuses on anti-racism work and LGBTQ plus justice. And as the moment is calling for, we are also leaning into resisting Christian nationalism. So in this hour together, we're going to do two things. We're going to identify Christian nationalism and look at some of the ways that it looks like. And we're also going to discuss some ways to resist now and how to prepare for the future. So Christians Against Christian Nationalism, which is a wonderful organization, defines Christian nationalism as a political ideology that seeks to merge Christian and American identities. And it distorts both the Christian faith and America's constitutional democracy. There are I converted my slides from Canva to PowerPoint and some of them got a little squished. There are kind of two flavors of Christian nationalism. One is the church statists, who openly reject democracy and advocate for a theocracy ruled by and for Christians who ascribe to biblical mandates based on a literalist and inerrantist interpretation of Scripture. So you can think kind of like Sharia law. This is the kind of system that the church statists would like to see. There are also Judeo-Christianists who oppose theocracy. They're not interested in that, but they want to limit civil rights and even citizenship itself to only those who embrace the primacy of the Judeo-Christian culture over every aspect of life. Are you depressed yet? It's not important to know the difference between these two groups, just to show you that there's a different flavor of Christian nationalism, different flavors that are going on. So I'm going to give you some statistics. These are from sociologist Andrew Whitehead, but they come courtesy Father Michael Delk, who is the priest at St. Thomas of Becket Episcopal Church in Morgantown, who led a wonderful class about Christian nationalism. And I can point you to the audio recordings of that class. So there are two figures that we're going to look at. Statistics about accommodators. These are folks who believe that Christianity should be a prominent part of our public sphere, but don't think that it should totally dominate other religious and secular modes of expression. So they are sort of on board with Christian nationalism, but they're not the diehards. The ambassadors believe that a certain type of Christianity should be privileged throughout society, and that all other modes of thought, religion or secular, should be completely excluded. So those are the two categories that we're going to look at, accommodators and ambassadors. So of all Americans, 33% fall into the accommodator category, and 16% fall into the ambassador category. Half of all Americans fall into one or two of these categories. And I see people taking pictures, totally happy for that, and also I can give you the slides afterwards if you don't want to do that. Now, let's move on to white Christians. So this is all Christians in the country, okay, that are white. And you've got 41% accommodators and 24% ambassadors. That's all Christian traditions. And if you exclude the Anabaptist traditions, like the church that we're in, who are peace churches, right, this is even higher in other places. So 65% of all white Christians in the US. It gets worse. Of white evangelicals, 36% accommodators, 39% ambassadors, so 75% of all white evangelicals. The good news, there is good news, I'm in the business of that. The good news is that 25% of white evangelicals are classified as resistors or rejectors, so that's hopeful. Many people would not self-consciously describe themselves as Christian nationalists, but they hold a cluster of beliefs that are totally aligned with the movement, and that bears out in polling. Now, one of the drivers of Christian nationalism is the New Apostolic Reformation. Revolution, the slide's wrong, New Apostolic Revolution. It's a far-right Christian movement that advocates for spiritual warfare to bring about Christian dominion over all aspects of society and to end or weaken the separation of church and state. Okay, so a dominionist theology that employs spiritual warfare. Would you raise your hand if you've heard of that term before? Yeah, spiritual warfare. Okay, so it's since there are a lot of folks who don't know it, it's the belief that there are supernatural forces at work and that Christians are particularly in charge of fighting those supernaturalist forces. They might use the language of demons or exorcising or any number of things. It was a fringe movement until the early 2000s, but it gained prominence and power with Trump's election in 2016. And the Southern Poverty Law Center characterizes the NAR as the greatest threat to American democracy that most people have never heard of. C. Peter Wagner, who's a church growth guru who kind of helped get this off the ground, says of it, "Our theological bedrock is what has been known as dominion theology. This means that our divine mandate is to do whatever is necessary by the power of the Holy Spirit to retake the dominion of God's creation, which Adam forfeited to Satan in the Garden of Eden. It is nothing less than seeing God's kingdom coming and God's will being done here on earth as it is in heaven." So this is like a total domination kind of theology, okay? Some of the beliefs that they hold, I'm kind of condensing some of these. The kingdom of God will come through the spiritual transformation of culture and society. The end times church will be the complete manifestation of Jesus on the earth. There's a strong focus on prophetic insight, by which that sort of means predictive, and supernatural manifestations. And here are some proponents of it. So those are some of your NAR folks. And wait, there's more. So, you need to know about the Seven Mountains Mandate. Okay, some people say it in the singular, some people say it in the plural. It's a dominionist, conservative Christian movement that's situated mostly within the NAR. And it holds that there are 7 aspects of society that believers seek to dominate. And some people list them in different orders, but family, religion, education, media, arts and entertainment, business, and government. So there is a belief that Christians need to dominate and shape all of those aspects of society, 7 mountains. So it had its origins in the 70s, but the thinking was revived in 2000, and it came into prominence just 12 years ago after the publication of Lance Wallnau's and Bill Johnson's Invading Babylon, the Seven Mountain Mandate. That was in 2013. Are you ready to see proponents of this particular school of thought? So, that's not exhaustive. A little bit scary there about Paula White, but we already knew that, right? There was a poll in January 2024, and it found that 41% of American Christians believe in the Seven Mountains Mandate. And that 42% of those folks believe that the United States should only award full citizenship to Christians. So that's 33 million people in the US that believe that. Everybody ready to take a deep breath? Deep breath. Okay. So that's the doctrine and some of the statistics, and it's super scary, right? So we're going to identify what Christian nationalism looks like in the wild, because it doesn't always look quite as frighteningly explicit as the doctrine that we just heard. So we have to be able to identify it when we see it. So the key word when you're trying to identify Christian nationalism is fusion, right? They're looking for a fusion between Christianity and the state in a way that the relationship is presumed or desirable, okay? So a fusion. Here are some images that unfortunately might seem a little bit normal to you now. So we've got angel wings with the American flag around the cross, okay? And some other ones. If you can't see the hat, it says, "Make America Pray Again." I'm unable to show video, but how many of you saw this exchange between Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz? Yeah, it's remarkable. We had about maybe a little under 10 hands that were showing. So Tucker Carlson is interviewing Ted Cruz and asking him about his position on Israel. And Ted Cruz says, well, the Bible says that we are to honor and bless Israel. And in its exchange that lasts like a minute and a half, where Tucker Carlson is really grilling him, like, where in the Bible does that say that? And Ted Cruz can't name that. And his pastor father probably is very embarrassed by that, because he's confidently claiming we're to bless Israel. And Tucker says, like, you mean like the nation of Israel? Yeah, the nation of Israel. He said, wait a second, you mean like the nation that Netanyahu is over? Yes. He's like, wait a second. Wait a second. It is a wild exchange, right? An absolutely wild exchange going on between these two people. Okay, that's Christian nationalism. What Ted Cruz is doing is Christian nationalism. There also was a recent declaration by the IRS. You may have be aware that churches have been limited, technically limited, from endorsing candidates, right? Or sort of like getting their toe too far into the water of politics. And law-abiding churches really haven't done that much. There are churches that have definitely been doing that. So that's been going on for a while, but now the IRS has like codified that it's totally fine for churches to endorse candidates. This is a radical change and really problematic. Anybody hear the State of the State address this year in February? Okay, this is Governor Morrissey. You should watch the clip, but I do have the transcript of the relevant part that I wanted to share with you, what he stated about 3/4 of the way through his address. One of West Virginia's great strengths is our conservative values. We stand for God, life, religious liberty, the Second Amendment, our Constitution, and our freedoms. We'll always fight for those values. Immediately after, he says, within 30 short days, we've already made progress tackling some of those issues. From day one, I said that we were going to root out DEI and eradicate the woke virus from infecting our schools. Upon taking office, I issued an executive order to eliminate DEI in state government and any entity receiving state resources. Here in West Virginia, we're going to follow the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. Every person, he says really emphatically, every person is equal in the eyes of God, and starting now, they will be equal under the law as well. We are not going to provide unlawful special privileges to special classes of people. Already, several of our largest universities have taken steps to shut down their DEI programs. That's a win for West Virginia. And we're not done yet. We're going to stand on the side of truth. Last week I joined President Donald Trump in the White House signing an executive order that banned men from competing in women's sports, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he says, we're standing for God, and also we just got rid of DEI and we're going to be transphobic. Okay? That's Christian nationalism. This year in the legislative session, a group of pastors, or about 8 clergy, that were sitting in on a Senate Judiciary Committee meeting because a death penalty piece of legislation was before them. The death penalty was, it was kind of like a narrow slice to revive the death penalty. Any slice is a problem. But one of the lawmakers, there was almost zero discussion, and one of the lawmakers said, wait, I need to say something. He said, I asked my pastor about this, and he said that if it weren't for the death sentence, the criminal hanging next to Jesus never would have been saved. For those who don't know the story, there's a criminal on either side of Jesus during his crucifixion, and Jesus is kind and gracious even upon dying in the middle of the death process. So this guy's like, yeah, it's necessary for salvation, so yeah, we should have the death penalty. Yeah. Now you're going to be really sad that my video isn't working because because I managed to find the one clip in this episode that doesn't have any swear words in it. If you have not watched episode 1 of season 27 of South Park, I highly recommend it, unless you can't tolerate swear words, and then you should not watch it at all. It's brilliant. It's brilliant on so many levels. In this particular scene, Jesus is literally in the school. Okay, so like, you know, people want more Jesus in the schools, and like Jesus is literally in the school. And Stan has refused Jesus a seat at his lunch table because there are no spare seats. And the principal essentially forces him into conversion in the office. You need to accept Jesus as your Savior, you need to accept him into our school, and you need to accept him at your lunch table. And he says, there wasn't any room. I was not bullying Jesus. He also says, I'm pretty sure you can't make me do this in the schools. And the principal says, it's 2025, things are all different now, stuff's legal that didn't used to be. Christian nationalism is bad for people who are not Christians, right? And it's bad for people who are Christians, both. Okay, we're going to look at schools in a second here, but the power of this particular scene is that the principal is coercing this child into some sort of confessional belief. And the way, sorry, I'm going to get preachy just for a second, but the way of Jesus is not one of coercion, it's one of invitation and grace and love. And so when you have a movement of people who are trying to force the whole world to conform to their really narrow theological take on the world, you are corrupting the church because you are linking the church with power. And Jesus is about giving away power and not claiming it and dominating. So, schools. Schools are a major focus for Christian nationalists. We've seen this in West Virginia. So our group did kind of an informal review of all the bills that were introduced in the 2024 state legislative session. And we found at least 90 bills introduced which had some sort of relationship to religion. And I want to thank Jaden Carter. She was an intern that did that work. There were three kinds of bills among those 90. One was about religion specifically. So there were bills specifically about that. I'll say a bit in a minute. There were bills that had a religious component, and then there were bills that had a hidden agenda, nothing explicitly religious about them, but when it came up on the floor for debate, religious comments were made. So some of the examples of bills being about religion explicitly were allowing public school teachers to discuss intelligent design creationism in the classroom. That passed after it was amended to allowing teachers to discuss scientific theories in the classroom. Another one is displaying the motto, "In God We Trust," in schools. They couldn't get it passed in 2024, it passed this year. So one of the reasons that I say that Christian nationalism is bad for people who don't have anything to do with Christianity is that you're just like dominating the space with God's name for people who don't find that to be part of their world, their belief system, their language, their way of viewing things. Bills that had a religious component included eliminating vaccine requirements for public schools, and requiring a course in public schools on human development. And the original version of that bill required teachers in West Virginia to show the Baby Olivia video. It's a video which is an animated glimpse of human life from the moment of fertilization, which is produced by an evangelical organization. That bill would have required teachers to show that propaganda video. The bills that had a hidden agenda were often related to health care, specifically reproductive health care and gender-affirming care. Things like the Chemical Abortion Prohibition Act. And on the floor, one of the lawmakers said, "It's up to God when a child is born." The agenda to dominate the schools is part of a larger playbook called Project Blitz, which some of you may have heard of. There's a coalition of over 40 groups of the Christian right, including the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation. Okay? They have these manuals which were publicly available a number of years ago, but then they went underground and you can't get their new manuals. But that playbook, those manuals have bill templates, and we have seen those bills be introduced in the state of West Virginia. And the playbook also includes this coordinated strategy of flooding state legislatures with a gradually intensifying series of bills to establish a biblically based society with a focus on controlling public schools. So there's two goals. One is to turn public schools into centers of Christian nationalist indoctrination under the guise of promoting freedom of religious expression. And they have 3 phases laid out in this playbook. One is to focus on symbolic gestures that are hard to oppose, like putting "In God We Trust" in the schools. The second is a little more direct, like mandating biblical literacy curriculum requirements and things like Christian Heritage Week in the public schools. And then the third phase of that is legalizing discrimination against those whose action or very being offends the sensibilities of conservative Christians. That's one goal. The second goal is to bankrupt public schools with a voucher system. Right? So if we can get the money taken out of the public schools, the schools will suck, and then we can shape the students however we want. We can make them be uneducated. An uneducated populace is easier to manipulate and control. You ready to talk about the resistance part? Yeah. Let's get to that part. Okay. So we're going to divide this resistance part into 2 things: what you can do now and how to prepare for the future. The posture that we want to take heading into all of this is that this is not normal. What we are in is not normal, and you have to keep that at the forefront. You have to be astounded at this stuff. We cannot throw up our hands and just say, "This is just how it is now." That can't be the case. We have to talk about it with our people. We have to continually be astounded. We have to talk about it some more and then take a nap and eat a snack. Because it is going to be a whole job to do this, okay? So there are things that you can do today, literally today, that you can do that will change the direction of our society. I'm going to keep you in suspense while I take a drink of water.
Is that a nap?
Yeah, that's my nap. The first thing that you can do is follow social media accounts of BIPOC leaders and organizers. Okay? What non-news media you consume and what content creators you follow online, or books or articles that you read or listen to, is crucial for shaping your imagination. If you are white, cisgender, and straight, it's of the utmost important that you start following and reading BIPOC and queer content. Okay? People who are part of cultures that are not heteronormative or white have the imagination to survive and thrive. Okay? Those are folks that we need guiding us and shaping our own imaginations. They have to be creative to exist in this world and thrive in this world. So they're people that we need to listen to. These are my top 2 recommendations. Lene Vinay does this really cool bit every Friday called Parking Lot Pimpin', and she does a hot take on whatever news is going on during the week. It's about 5 minutes. High recommend on what she's doing. The other is a queer black person named Adrienne Marie Brown, who's a brilliant organizer, who just has a wide variety of content on their page. So these are the top 2 I would recommend for national content creators. I would also highly recommend Black by God, the West Virginian, which is West Virginia's only Black-owned news outlet. Important work. Crystal Good's at the helm of that, and it's amazing. And then 2 other social media accounts that you can follow are Our Moral Imperative and Decolonize Myself. Once you start following those, your algorithm will change and you'll find other stuff to follow as well. The one that I mentioned earlier is called Christians Against Christian Nationalism. I recommend on going to their website. They have tons of resources. They typically have petitions as well. It's just a really good voice and movement to be following. All right. The other thing that you can do right now is that you can pull those traditional levers of civic engagement, right? So you could call, you can email your lawmakers, you can show up in their office, you can write letters to the editor and op-eds, you can be part of actions like rallies and protests. All of those are important to keep doing. It's important to agitate, it's important not to roll over, it's important to keep speaking in the ways that a lot of people will hear. But we're gonna do it with a new twist. Okay? And the new twist is that we need to expose every bigoted thing that is being said by a lawmaker. That when you are writing a letter to the editor, when you are writing an op-ed, if you are a person who makes TikToks or Reels, just quote them. You don't have to do any other work other than say the words that they're saying, because the words that they're saying are awful. Okay, so I say keep doing those things, but you got to do it with the means of exposing the kinds of rhetoric that these people are using. Okay, the outcomes of using these traditional levers of civic engagement may not be what we want them to be, but it's important to continue to keep, like I said, talking through channels that exist and that people need to see us working through. Now, there's also some tactics that you may not have practiced before, but you can do these things right now. One is called malicious compliance. Has anybody ever heard of that before? Yeah, it's so fun. Okay. So it's you can just say petty. It's just really petty, and it's so great. So there's the concept of anticipatory obedience, right? Where you just do what's asked, maybe even before it's asked of you. You hear that something's coming down the pike. It's a change that everyone's supposed to make, like maybe a DEI removal mandate, and you just go ahead and do it before there's any chance of getting into trouble. Or if you receive, this works in businesses really well, or departments, if you receive a directive that is stupid, let's say, just really stupid. Let's say that there's a manager who says, everything that you do in this department needs to be documented by email. You know what you do? You document everything by email. 10:47, going to the bathroom to take a quick break. Send off that email, right? 11:59, going to the lunchroom to heat up my soup, right? You just flood the system with emails. So there are ways that you can be creative that are actually like a little bit life-giving to be able to engage in malicious compliance. And it's a good practice for us to do against things that are just going to be seen as orders, right? Things that we are supposed to be doing because we're told to do them. Some of you have been in a class that I helped co-teach, but this is one of my favorite images of malicious compliance. It happened in an HOA, and a man had a boat, and he was instructed to build a fence to cover that boat. And so he built a fence to cover the boat and painted it just like the boat. Letter of the law, people. So you can do all those kinds of things today with no training. Who you follow on social media, how you pull those levers of civic engagement, and malicious compliance. There's one more that I want to talk about, which requires a little bit more practice, but you could do it tonight if you wanted to. It's what I call the well-placed question. So you know those situations when you're standing in a group, small group of people, let's say at a social event or after a meeting, and somebody makes one of those jokes, right? Those jokes that is drawing on a presumably shared understanding of a particular group of people. Let's say it's a racist or a homophobic joke. And what do people do in those situations? You just laugh, right? Look at your feet, turn away, get some punch, whatever. There's a way that you can engage that. And it's a way that doesn't require very much of you at all and puts all the onus on the person who's made the joke or the statement. And all you have to do is say, why is that funny? And then the person's going to double down on it. They're going to say it again because they're just going to presume that everybody shares their point of view, and they will say it again. And then all you have to do is say, but why is that funny? They might start to stammer a little bit, right? And you keep asking that kind of question. I don't understand. Can you explain to me why that's funny? It's not making sense. That's all you have to do. It just puts the onus on them to have to be able to verbalize out loud what they think everyone's presumed attitude or approach is. I was debating whether to say this. This is one of those things, particularly if you are a cisgender man, that you can really learn from the women in your life. Because sometimes it's just so helpful for us to say, I just don't understand. I'm sorry, could you please explain that to me? It's really helpful. So if you ever really want to see somebody super skilled at that, I'll give you some recommendations. So the well-placed question. It takes a little bit of practice, but it doesn't require debate, right? It doesn't require knowledge. All it requires is the courage to ask a really simple question. Okay, so we've talked about what you can do today. Now we're going to talk about what you can learn. Okay, so there's skill building. There's tools that you can put in your toolbox. So know your rights regarding protests and arrests and recording interactions between law enforcement officers and people that they are engaging with, particularly black and brown people. Additional skills that you can build are skills in de-escalation, bystander intervention, first aid, being a street medic. And MICA and the ACLU of West Virginia can offer many of these trainings to you. You don't have to do all of these, but if you do one of them, if everybody in this room did one of them, that would be great. Okay, so those are tools that you can start to build. You can also have conversations in community. So if you're part of a religious community, and I speak from the Christian tradition, so I sort of think of churches. When I say this, I might lapse into some Christian language. There are particular kinds of discussion that a religious community can have. And if you're interested in seeing these conversations happen in a religious community that you're part of, talk to your faith leader and tell them that you want those conversations to happen. It is super helpful as a faith leader to be able to say, oh, well, other people in the church want to talk about this, right? It takes a little bit of the heat off the faith leader to be able to do something that the faith leader might want to do already, which is, say, talk about Christian nationalism or any number of concerns or issues. So if you're part of a faith community and you're wanting to see more of that in your church, you are a driver of those conversations. For Christians, those conversations could be about knowing your identity as the church versus the identity as a citizen or part of the state. So you could go into things like civil religion or the history of the religious right, You can be asking questions if you are a congregation that has a flag in the sanctuary. Why do we have that there? Why are we applying Christian rhetoric to military service? Okay, there's all sorts of conversations that if you're wanting to see them happen, talk to your faith leader. There are also some conversations coming up. I'm going to give you three kind of little promos here that are not specifically for people of faith, but kind of engage this idea of empire. So the first one is one that Justice and Jubilee, one of my organizations, is doing, and it starts next week. It's about stopping the weaponization of Scripture. And this is a module that's 5 weeks long that's specifically focused on faith and empire. There will be, the first video dropped yesterday. There's a video released each week, and then there's a Zoom component. So if you want to dive deeper into discussion about the content in the video, you can register to participate in as few or as many Zooms as you like. You just have to register one time. So I'll give you information about registration later. That's specifically to help people be able to identify when Scripture is being weaponized, and in this particular 5-week module with regard to empire, and equip people to be able to respond when they hear that in conversation with people that they know, okay? So you don't have to leave there responding, but at least you have information to know how to respond, and we practice that in the Zooms each week. Another one is going to be led by West Virginia Can't Wait. It's a homecoming event that'll happen just south of Morgantown on October 18. I'll be leading a workshop for that called Resisting Authoritarianism and talking about non-compliance and non-cooperation. So you can find that on West Virginia Can't Wait's page or Stephen Smith's Facebook page. And then the last one is happening on Saturday, November 15 in Morgantown. There's no home game that day. Disrupting Empire, Resisting Christian Nationalism Through Nonviolence. So that is also something that my organization puts on, and we trace the relationship between church and state going back to like the 3rd century. It's quick. And we also talk about practical skills of resistance. So I'll also tell you later where you can find information about that. Those are all things you can learn, tools you can put in your toolbox. And I'm going to spend the remaining time talking about what you can plan for, okay? Things that we can be doing now that we will need in the very near future. This, while some of the people here or other people will want to continue to agitate and pull those traditional levers of civic engagement and democracy, other people might feel more pulled to work for the possible path that lies ahead. And this is presuming the question, what if resisting doesn't work? We have to be willing to acknowledge that this is a live question. All of the kinds of resistance that we might engage in might not work. Okay, so then what? Then what? This is a situation that honestly, the picture I get in my head is like the zombie apocalypse. Okay, what happens when education is crumbling? What happens when healthcare is crumbling? What happens when the safety nets are going to continue to crumble? What is going to happen when climate change is hastened by AI? What's going to happen when fascism absolutely has completely taken over? We have to go down that road. I always feel a little weird talking about that, like it's conspiracy theory stuff, but the more people that I talk to that are organizers, when I say that, they say, we're talking about that too. Okay, this is people all over the country. So one of the things that I want to lay before you tonight, some of you might be familiar with this, and there are people in this room that are more equipped to talk about this than me, but is the concept and the practice of mutual aid. Who has heard of mutual aid? Oh, great. Fantastic. For those who haven't, mutual aid is a way to meet people's survival needs while also trying to help organize people who are closest to the problem to find solutions that are often creative to that problem. For a long time, we've talked about meeting people's material needs as like charity. That's a language, particularly in churches, that's kind of an approach that we take. We feed people, we have baby pantries, there are all sorts of ways that we help meet people's material needs. That kind of charity, while so well-intentioned, maintains a power differential that is unhelpful. It just replicates a dynamic where there are people that have and people who don't have, and the people who have are probably smarter and greater resourced, and so they know how to fix things. And we're just going to give you people who don't have stuff out of the goodness of our hearts. And it's really, really well-intended and important work. I think it's helpful for us to shift to the term survival needs. Okay, this is language used in mutual aid practices, survival needs. If we're engaged in that kind of work, we're not great people. We're just trying to help other people survive. Okay, that's not fancy or laudable. We're just looking out for the people around us. Instead of that model of charity, which really looks at this dynamic of haves and have-nots, even if well-intended, what we need to be doing is thinking about models of solidarity, where we are in relationship with people who are not able to survive on their own. I could talk for an hour about this. I won't, but I'll say a few things. One is, Joy, would you raise your hand? If you want to know about mutual aid, you need to talk to Joy Carr, is one person that you need to talk to in this room. You also, again, could talk to Zach back there, who will for a second time raise his hand. Zach's congregation, First Presbyterian, serves as the host site for the monthly Morgantown Mutual Aid fairs. I would highly recommend that you go to volunteer for those fairs and or give money to Morgantown Mutual Aid. Something special is happening there where people's survival needs are met with dignity. And Brian Butcher, city councilor, is also very, very involved in that, and Danielle Stoneberg. Appalachia is well suited for taking care of people around us. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Zach.
It's the second Thursday
Thank you.
of every month.
Second?
Tonight it's happening. So second Thursday in October.
Thank you. Second Thursday of every month in the gym. And it's about kind of this climate. So if you go, wear shorts. It's a little toasty in the gym, but good work is being done there. Mutual aid just thinks about a way that we think about what's at our disposal, whether it's in a neighborhood, in a group of friends, in a congregation. What are the assets that we have to feed into a system that already exists, okay? Mutual aid has been done for a long time by populations that are marginalized with no fancy name, right? Populations that are deeply impoverished, financially impoverished, harm reduction networks, networks among BIPOC folks where people just take care of each other. So this is a way to say, I have needs that I can feed into this system, assets that I can feed into this system, but I also have needs and they might be met by someone that I don't expect to meet them or wouldn't normally cross paths with. So I'll have to give you my whole mutual aid spiel another time. But I do, the other one I want to point out to, and Eve, can you raise your hand? Eve is somebody that's involved in the Repair Cafe that happens in Osage, where people bring their skills and you can come there and avail yourself of their skills, or you can bring a skill. So if you need your knives sharpened, you can go there, or if you have a young person in your family who has no problem operating their iPad, there may be someone there that needs a little bit of assistance. So Repair Cafe, you can talk to Eve about that. To close, what I want to say, when we're thinking about, no, there's two more things. When we're thinking about prepping for the future, We're even maybe thinking about medicine, right? How to have medicine on hand. And there are lots of content creators that you can follow that give a slow-paced way to build up resources that you might end up needing. So like every month buy a bottle of ibuprofen at the grocery store to have on hand, okay? I know these things sound really dire, and at the very worst, maybe we've wasted, $25 on ibuprofen. At the very best, we're helping our neighbors tomorrow, but we may need to engage in those practices for like 2 years from now, or 1 year, maybe 5 years. If you'd like to have more conversation about that, I'd be happy to do that. So I do want to kind of conclude with just some approaches and postures that we need to take with regard to mutual aid. It is likely that almost no people in this room will be architects of these mutual aid networks, okay? There's going to be an element of submission and humility for most of the people in this room who might begin engaging in practices of mutual aid. When it comes to ways that Christian nationalism and authoritarianism is impacting people, we need to listen to impacted people and follow their cues. I said earlier that the people who are closest to the problem are the ones who know the solutions. And they might not be the solutions that you want or that you think are right. And we have to prioritize and elevate their concerns and their solutions, not invent what we think is best. So when it comes to mutual aid, I'm not asking anybody out there to develop a new thing. You find the people that are already doing the thing and you offer them your time and your money and setting up the chairs and breaking down the tables and whatever their strategy is, you follow and support it. The last approach that I want to suggest is that we need to listen to young people. This is going to be especially hard for a lot of baby boomers and some of us Gen X folks. If that describes you, you grew up in a world where you worked your way up a chain of responsibility and authority, and then it was thought that a person just sort of through age and experience moves into those top dog roles, probably in your work. And when you get in those top dog positions, you finally have a chance to direct things. This is a model that's in universities and hospitals and secular employment, the business world. This is a new time. That model no longer is going to work to take care of and feed people. Young people know more than we do. They know how to navigate this culture. They're going to push the envelope. And as much as it's going to cause some of us to have to bite our tongues or chew our nails, they are the people that we need to be resourcing and supporting. They know how to navigate a world out there that exists that many of us don't. And we have to listen and support them. I just wanted to say again, as I conclude, that you can find the Faith Collective at wvfaith.org. I've got some brochures in the back that have a QR code for the website as well as my business card. And you can like our Facebook page and sign up for our emails. It's like 1 email a week max. And then Justice and Jubilee, which is doing this Christian nationalism work, is also on the back of my business card. And if you want to pull up the web page with this QR code, you can find out where to register for Disarming the Bible. And I think that's it. I think we're at Q&A. Which I'm in charge of, apparently.
Questions for Jenny?
Yeah. Was the, I gotta get 2 minutes. The baby Olivia, I think it was that passed?
It was not.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah. She asked if Baby Olivia, the bill requiring the teachers to show Baby Olivia was passed, and it was not.
Gentlemen,
Another question of the state of address, where the religious freedom came up.
I didn't hear the end of your question. I know you said the state of the state address, and you were talking about religious freedom.
Exactly. Help me understand what that means, because what about other religions or Lord?
I didn't hear the end still.
He wants to know about what about other religions?
Sure. What Religious Freedom Restoration Acts do, RFRAs is what they're called, RFRA, is privilege. They sound great. They sound like it's supposed to be free expression of all kinds of religions, but what they actually end up doing is privileging Christianity. And it also privileges Christianity in a way that allows Christianity to not, people who claiming a Christian conscience, to not suffer consequences for exercising their religion. It ends up being a cover or a guise for people to get away with a lot under the name of Christianity. Does that help?
Good.
Okay. Yeah.
It's feasible or possible to try and get your pastor to discuss this as part of a sermon, or is it better to do a group at another time?
Yeah, that's such a great question. The question was, if you're part of a church, is it better to get your pastor to talk about this stuff in a sermon or in a group? And I really think that's dependent on the context. I think the best step that you can take is go and talk to your pastor and see what might be feasible in your congregation. Because there is a lot of context going on in pastoral decisions that are being made. And so that would depend on probably personalities in your congregation. It might depend on whether your pastor's sermons are recorded and put online. There are just any number of reasons a pastor might decide to do it one way or the other.
Yeah, there's a
What is their plan for gay people, the Christian Nationalists? I understand they're already going after trans people, but ultimately for people who are gay or queer, aren't trans, I know they want to get rid of our legal rights, but how far will they go? Deportation, criminalization of the act. What do you know about that?
I don't have the answers to that, and I didn't go very much into that in my description of Christian nationalists because I just don't want to continue to put that rhetoric out there, right? We all know that. We all know about the kinds of positions that Christian nationalists hold about queer people. So I don't, if somebody else has more information about Project 2025, Pastor Stephen, do you want to?
Well, I don't have more information about Project 2025. When it comes to like sexual orientation or gender identity and Christianity, and this is my personal like soapbox, so feel free to like push back if you want, Jenny. But I think what we need is to be reading queer theologians and queer biblical scholars.
Yeah.
Biblical literacy and theological literacy among everyone, especially Christian groups, is at an all-time low. And when biblical literacy and theological literacy is low, it can be whatever someone tells you it is. There are wonderful queer theologians and biblical scholars out there doing just absolutely marvelous work and pushing back on Christian nationalism in their own spaces and communities.
Kevin, you're at?
Yeah, I'm going to say just one more thing on that. Thank you so much for sharing that. This is not quite the answer to the question that you asked, but a couple of other things along that line. One is the disarming the Bible, stopping the weaponization of Scripture. We are going to have a class, I think, starting in January, that focuses at what are called the clobber passages. Those are the 6 or 7 passages in Scripture that people take out of context to legitimate homophobia. So it will be specifically oriented to that, and that's to your point, which is people don't know how to respond when they're hearing the Bible being weaponized in terms of queer folks. That's one thing. The other thing that I want to say, it's Anne, is that right? Are you Anne? What I hear in your question is just a real concern for personal safety. Yeah, and that's like legitimate. One of the way that I think about that is how are all of us going to care for our neighbors and care, I think we need to be asking ourselves, what is the extent to which I will go to shelter someone? Because I think it's a reasonable question. Whether it's my neighbor who has maybe one of the gray area statuses of documentation for citizenship or residence. Maybe it's a queer neighbor or someone in our house. Like that basement room, are you willing to set it up and house someone in your house? Are you willing to let a space that you have at your disposal serve as kind of sanctuary? Again, I know that sounds like way far out there, but I just am not sure that it is. I think we have to begin interrogating ourselves as to what we will do to keep others safe. Yeah, Scott, I think you've had your hand up for a minute.
Is there another way to label what we call Christian nationalism? Because there's nothing Christian about it.
Yeah, I know. It's an unfortunate moniker. I hear people kind of shifting to authoritarianism, but that doesn't get at the brand of what we're talking about. Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate. It's also, I mean, it's unfortunate in the way that the term progressive Christian is unfortunate. I'm not progressive. I just believe that Jesus tells me to love people. I don't get what's so radical about that. So, yeah, they're unfortunate monikers. Yeah.
Thanks for your presentation. I guess I've been reflecting on this question of what our posture should be in this time, and I really appreciated in your presentation your call for us to sort of, stand up for our values and be in solidarity with others, and that very much aligns with I think about Jesus, hanging out with prostitutes and lepers and all that. But I'll just speak for myself. The part I've always struggled with is that Jesus also hung out with and embraced tax collectors, right? Like the symbols of an empire. And so I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about, for those of us who do identify as Christian, sort of where things like curiosity about others, empathy, willingness to engage in relationship building across sort of political boundaries, so that ideally we could move towards a shared conception of the common good as a country instead of sort of being in these rival camps. Just any thoughts?
Yeah, that's such a great question. The question was, to boil it down too simply, oversimply, is, how can we engage in conversation with people who are unlike us or people who are harming people that we love or harming ourselves, right? People ask me that about my work. They say, well, what are you doing to get people to talk across the aisle? And my response to that is nothing, because there are people for whom that is their work. But as far as I'm concerned, there are so many folks that have been harmed by Christianity that my personal call is to go be with those folks, right? So there are people for whom that is a call to sort of navigate those conversations. There's a group called Braver Angels. Yeah, okay, you've heard of it, which facilitates those kind of conversations among people who have political differences. But personally, and I would welcome other people's responses because this is just mine, I don't think that there is changing the mind of Christian nationalists. Particularly the ambassadors, that's not going to happen. So it may be that those well-placed questions, right, could help break down some of those walls. Sorry, sometimes I get stories and I have to filter, can I share that story about my mom? I'm not sure, who was a wonderful person, not a Christian nationalist. Yeah, so yeah, I do think curiosity and empathy is good. For me, I just have to draw the line with, are they harming people? Is what they buy into harming my kid? I'm not personally able to engage in that. Do I wish they were hit by a car? I don't. I mean, really, that ends up being sort of my Christian metric for forgiveness, right? I am not down with what you're doing. I also don't want you to die. I don't wish you that kind of ill, but wow, you're really doing a lot of harm. So I'm sorry, that's kind of an insufficient answer. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you thought about sort of, is there anything unique that people who are not Christians could do?
They were asking, is there anything unique that people who are not Christian can do? I mean, yeah, all of that stuff, pulling all of the levers. Really, I mean, even if learning about the Bible isn't something that's harmful to you, like for some people that would touch a lot of religious trauma, but it's not a bad idea to learn it if that's something that you're open to doing so that you can be able to respond. Some folks, are just parroting what they've heard from the pulpit. So if you're able to say to those folks, actually, it doesn't say that, and able to provide, substantiation for your response, that might cause some people to think. Those classes, the Disarming the Bible classes that I mentioned, I should have said, are not a traditional Bible study, so it doesn't presume that everybody in there is Christian. It's biblical studies that takes a scholarly approach. So nobody's trying to convert anybody, but it's just a way to try to get to know Scripture. So I think in the face of Christian nationalism, it can't hurt to do that. Yeah. Yeah.
This is a great lecture. Thank you so much. What seems like what they're trying to do is they want to have this dominant sect. So if you're not in that sect, you're like a second-class citizen.
Right.
So you may read the Bible or some other religious texts. You're not in a majority sect. So it's not just, there's just so many people that are under threat by this. And these other churches that aren't like the fundamentalist churches.
Right.
And I know you mentioned the West Virginia Faith Collective, but I'm wondering, if you could speak to the organizing, not only at the state level, but the national level, and all these other sects that aren't this dominant Christian nationalist fundamentalist sect that is basically they've taken over the government of West Virginia. They're taking over the federal government. So what kind of united front is going on or organizing that we could support or we should know about, at the national level, bringing together all these minority religious groups that are going to be under threat and could be persecuted and that kind of thing, because if we could empower them now and help out in some way, what could we do?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. There are two that immediately come to mind. One is Faith in Action, and the other one is Faith in Public Life. Those are really kind of two progressive Christian organizations, organizing networks across the state. Also Christians Against Christian Nationalism. And for faith leaders, if those of you who are in faith communities may want to tell, this is explicitly for Christian clergy, called the Clergy Emergency League. They're fantastic, and they are doing a lot, particularly around immigration right now, but it's modeled kind of after Bonhoeffer and the resistance in Nazi Germany. So it's 2,500 clergy nationally, or no, they're up to 3,500. Yeah.
Repairs of the breach.
Thank you. Zach, Zach is going to tell you. I love doing this to Zach. About repairs of the breach.
Have folks heard of the new iteration of the Poor People's Campaign? If you have not, yay, Eve definitely has. I implore you to look that up, because Repairs of the Breach is the clergy offshoot of that. And this is a politically engaged, mostly from a faith perspective group that's doing social and political activist kind of work. And they're doing a lot more in DC now. This was started by a person named Reverend William Barber, who was doing it in North Carolina. And he was building coalitions of people of faith and really of people not of faith, but he speaks primarily from a faith perspective of folks who are, no matter whether they identify ideologically on one side of the proverbial aisle or the other, they're trying to bring a coalition of people together just for basic common decency and public health.
Thank you. Zach's been to, Repairers of the Breach. Zach's been to DC with them, with some of their actions. Dr. Barber is incredible, and so them and Poor People's Campaign. Thank you.
Memorial Monday on the 18th down in Charleston, which is associated.
Okay, so Dr. Barber's coming back.
Not Dr. It's across the entire South rally of bringing Poor People Campaign people together in capitals across the South.
Gotcha.
There's one happening in Charleston.
So August 18, next Monday? Okay, next Monday there's one. Thank you. We also, just sidebar, had a little kind of burgeoning Moral Monday movement happening this past legislative session, and that may kick back up again this next legislative session.
So I imagine eventually they're going to have to amend the Constitution to get rid of freedom of religion and get rid of separation of church and state.
Yeah, I'm such a bad projector of what they're going to do.
I don't understand why the freedom of religion doesn't stop some of these things cold right there. I mean, we already had that.
Yeah, the lawmakers have to stop it, and they're not. I mean, we're watching that happen, right? They're just not stopping things. That's my 2 cents. Ron?
Yeah. What we just heard, this is a movement, okay? And it's pretty significant what this movement is doing. This movement is going to the point where there's going to be one dominant religion. One. And they believe that dominant religion, because we believe in God, their God, there is no separation of church and state. The people who are Christians are in charge, so we don't need a separation. And this is slowly moving, so they don't have to change the Constitution. All they have to do is keep people uneducated. And this is slowly moving forward. This is why I particularly like what we're hearing tonight, because it's just not resistance against Trump. There's another group of people out there actively working to assist Trump from a religious perspective. And we just heard from her slide that, they're saying it's okay to endorse candidates from the pulpit. Well, evangelicals have been doing that. Now they have the legal authority to do it.
Yeah, Susan.
I just keep thinking about all these horrible things that are passing through law. Well, everybody who's going to be affected by this, including people who voted for this.
Right.
So who are they going to turn to for help when all these things come through?
Right. There's our opportunity for Christian generosity, right?
And they're going to say, these people are so kind and they're helping us. Hey, who are you? Well, let me tell you who we are.
Yeah.
So they're going to need us, and we're going to have to be humble enough to help these people.
Yeah, I mean, Christian or not, are you going to help your neighbor with a Trump flag?
Tear down.
Right? I mean, yeah, they can get rid of the flag, but if the power grid goes out, are you going to help them? Oh, sorry. No, not help them hang their flag. No. When they are in distress, right? Yeah. What's that? You can burn the flag for heat. Yeah.
That's somebody else's flag.
It probably won't burn because it's so cheap.
Can we thank Jenny again?